At dusk, there came a turning. There was a moment when all was known. You could feel beauty rising.
Hi, my name is Sue Skaski with Vermont Volunteer Services for Animals Humane Society, and welcome to our show For the Animals. Today we have a very special guest, Zach Smith from Bellows Falls, who's here to talk about a subject that I don't know a whole lot factually about, but it's certainly one that I feel very sad about, distraught about, frustrated about, and we wanted to share it with you because it's before the Vermont legislature right now. And it's the issue of bringing back the snare. Snare trap or snare?
Snare trap.
Okay. And we were talking about these a little bit before. It's a debate whether it's been outlawed since the 1920s or 1961.
I believe it's 1961 that they've been outlawed since, or this type of trap. I'm not 100% on that, but I mean, look at it.
Oh, you know, explain now what you were talking to me about. First, how they're set.
Okay.
It's indiscriminate,
Yep.
so it's going to catch whatever goes in its path.
Yeah. So sometimes they're anchored to a tree. They can be anchored to a tree like this, and they're set on the ground open almost all the way most of the time, so that whatever they're hunting for or trapping for comes into play. It'd be open all the way like that.
Okay.
This would be anchored to a tree, or sometimes even in the air, to a sapling. The animal walks into it, hits the trigger, and it pulls tight.
Ow, that is tight.
Yes, it is, and they lock tight, too.
Okay, so wait a minute.
And
then
as
it
soon
locks?
as it's tight, most of the time the animal's trying to get away, so there's no way they're going to be able to get away. It's going to cut right into their flesh, cause them to bleed and everything else. It's very inhumane. The other way, sometimes they're spring set to a sapling or a strong tree most of the time.
Okay.
Like this, hung in the air. And again, they're going to come walk along and they're going to hit a trap, and it's just going to tighten up, and it's going to strangle them.
And it's going to bring them up in the air.
Most likely, if they're a small animal like a lynx, coyote, and if the sapling's strong enough, it will lift them right into the air.
Or a cat.
Yep, cat,
Or a dog.
Your cat gets out of the house and it doesn't come back. You may think a coyote or a fox got it. Heck, it could be one of these.
Okay. Let's think about this. If an animal were caught, how long does it take to strangle? I mean, if it gets it
Depending on
in
the
the
size
neck.
of the animal. If it was probably like a lynx or something, maybe 3-4 minutes. But that's 3-4 minutes of not breathing and
Struggling.
constantly struggling, kicking, and everything else.
Okay. And then what happens if it doesn't pull as tight so the animal
Well,
doesn't
the animal
die?
just sits there and suffers until the hunter comes along to check his traps either within a day or two, and then he ends up putting them out of their misery by shooting them in the head
Okay.
because he doesn't want to damage the rest of the pelt because he's trying to make money. Most of the people that do this aren't doing it for food. They're doing it to make money off the fur.
And I thought that fur wasn't a big industry in Vermont anymore.
It's not in Vermont anymore. Like in Alaska, it's still a really big profitable area. Beaver goes for like, I think of one coat's like $80 to $100 or more.
You know, I talked to someone last night from Bridgewater who said 20 years ago we had 19 trappers in Vermont.
Mm-hmm.
In Bridgewater, we have one now.
See, I think that's how it should be. I don't think trapping should be allowed in the state of Vermont or New England for that matter.
And you know, most of the hunters that I've talked to, in fact, honestly, every single hunter I've talked with feels the same way.
I'm a hunter myself. I love hunting. I love fishing. I love anything that has to do with the outdoors personally. I don't like trapping.
What other traps are there?
You've got your
Conibear?
Yep. You've got, there's beaver traps which sit in the water, and it works very similar to this, and it'll drown the beaver. I mean, pretty much every trap has to do with pretty much keeping the animal pinned down just like this. back in the 20s and 30s, they had what was called a clamshell as well. I'm pretty sure that's the name of it. And it had teeth on it and everything. And when it shut, it would snap the leg, and it would rupture blood vessels and cause the animal to bleed out. But it didn't always cause them to bleed out. They'd end up probably 50 to 60 yards away from the trap because it would cut their leg off.
And I've seen, yeah, and when we were talking about this, you also noted that a lot of times animals have their joints.
Yeah, because the trapper puts it on too strong of a branch because he wants to make sure that he gets hold of the animal. Sometimes it pops their joints out. Sometimes it even rips limbs off.
And this is what David Dean, a representative from Westminster, is trying to reintroduce in Vermont.
He doesn't need to reintroduce any. If anything, if anybody out there wants to make these illegal or making trapping illegal in the state of Vermont would be really nice.
Yeah.
Doesn't need to be. If you want to go out and hunt, go out and hunt. Use a bow, a gun. Don't use a trap.
Indiscriminate, painful, and definitely not a slow, quick death.
No, it takes time.
Okay, so thank you very much. There aren't many people that I've talked to that are experienced with this, so I thank you so much for coming on and sharing.
It's not a problem. My grandfather's father was a trapper in Vermont and actually in Massachusetts as well. So.
And you know, a lot of my older friends from Vermont used to do that. My dear friend that passed away years ago, Lawrence Curtis, used to trap, and then he said one day he walked up on an animal and he saw the fear in that animal's face as he tried to get away for his life. And after that, Lawrence said, never again.
There was a place in Brattleboro where I was growing up, and there was somebody that was permitted to set traps and stuff like that. And I was probably, I don't know, 7, 8 years old. I'm 22 now, so anytime I saw him, I usually ripped him down, even at that age.
What is it? I'd rather go to jail for something I've done than go to hell for something I failed to do.
Yes.
Ethical.
Yes.
Okay, and now we're going to talk more about the bill, but thank you for coming.
You're welcome.
We're back in the office of VBSA. We're going to discuss House Bill 589, a legislative effort to bring back the use of snares in Vermont. And with me is Jan Lee from Woodstock, Vermont. She's a board member of VBSA, and she's equally concerned about this issue. Thank you, Jan, for coming.
Thank you for giving me the opportunity.
So this bill would repeal the current prohibition in the law on the snaring of animals. However, after reading this 15-page bill, we discovered that there are other provisions tucked in that would radically change existing law with regard to hunting and migratory birds.
Can you tell me who's sponsoring the bill?
I can. There is one sole sponsor of this bill, and his name is David Dean. He's a representative of the chair of the House Committee on Fish, Wildlife, and Water Resources.
So this one sponsor, I've read his bio, and it reads in part, David L. Dean of Westminster, Windham County, Democrat, was born in Pennsylvania, December 20th, 1944, and became a resident of Westminster in 1972. His occupation is the river steward for the Connecticut River Watershed Council, and he is a member of Trout Unlimited, Bass Anglers Association, Vermont American Civil Liberties Union, Ducks Unlimited, Atlantic Salmon Association, International Game Fish Association, Vermont River Conservancy, Vermont Community Foundation, Common Cause of Vermont, Bonnie Vale Environmental Education Center. Member of the Senate since 1987 to 88, and member of the House 1991 to 2014. His home phone is 802-869-3116, and his email is strictlytrout@vermontel.net, excuse me.
You know, he seems to be very drawn to the use of animals.
Absolutely, yeah.
So let's talk about the use of the snare. What is a snare?
Well, a snare is one of the most primitive, it's the most inhumane thing. It's totally torturous. An animal gets caught in a snare and can get caught by its neck, its foot, its midsection.
Mm-hmm.
And this snare, it's very simple. All it does is, it's like a loop, a noose. The animal steps in or puts its head in or body, and when the animal tries to move, it tightens. And every time the animal moves, it tightens more. And it can crush its vital organs, it can choke it to death, it can just trap its foot so that it can't get away and predators can come to it. It's just, it's very easy, it's very inexpensive, so people like it.
And most trappers today can make their own snares.
Yeah.
And you know, Jen, it's also indiscriminate. Any animal or human can be caught in this barbaric trap and slowly strangled to death. Or worse, they can fight for their life and be torn limb from limb trying to escape. Or be left as bait for an animal to feed on them while they lie defenseless. Or wait in agony for the trapper to return hours, days later to finally put them out of their misery.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And one of the studies found that 10.8, average 10.8 non-targeted animals were trapped for each targeted animal.
Right.
And at the beginning of the show, a young hunter was interviewed who abhors the use of these traps because of its cruelty.
And actually, we could not find one person willing to say that they support the use of this torturous device to be allowed back in Vermont.
Mm-hmm.
But we did find clear explanations of what it does to whatever animal is caught.
As we've mentioned, this type of snare tightens as the animal struggles. So they further injure themselves that way. And they strangle their victims. Again, they crush their vital organs. It leads to an agonizing and prolonged death. And they're particularly cruel to their primary targets, which are coyotes, foxes, wolves, cats and dogs, whatever walks in the path, because significant musculature around these animals' tracheas and common carotid arteries slows the death.
Yeah. We have some pretty graphic video that we hope to be able to show you on this, but you can also see it online. One thing we did find online that was just heartbreaking, a couple, May 2013, and it's entitled Pet Survives 7-Hour Snare Ordeal. A dog is recovering, spending 7 hours trapped in a snare with a wire noose around its neck. Relieved owners John and Yvonne Roberts say their black lab Macy had a lucky escape from the trap, believed to have been set by a gamekeeper. The couple, who lived near Brampton, were walking their 8-year-old pet last Friday morning when she disappeared. After searching the area for 7 hours, they eventually found Macy, sitting motionless and not making a sound, in a dense woodland about 5:30 p.m. Mrs. Roberts said, and I quote, "She was quite distressed and was shaking. I think she was wise enough to know that if she tried to pull or get out of the wire, she wouldn't have survived. Fortunately, she had the sense to stay still. It must have been terrifying. The woods is very dense, and while we were never going to stop searching, we only found her by chance." Mrs. Roberts said that the Labrador was not injured during the ordeal, adding, "We were shocked by what happened, but very relieved because it could have been a lot worse." Again, it's because the dog didn't pull.
Mm-hmm.
We didn't have her on the lead because we often walk in that area. It's very rural, and the dogs enjoy walking both on the path and going into the woods. We just couldn't understand how, when she went missing, there was no sound. We retracked the whole of the route we had walked and suspected she may have been injured. Again, you can see more of that if you go online, and we'll put that website up. But that was just one of many different stories that we found. The Audubon magazine, September 2002, describes what snare users called jellyheads, and this is really pretty upsetting. Like I said, we did our research on this.
snared animals with grotesquely swollen heads as a result of the blood moving through the jugular vein toward the heart being restricted, while that flowing from the heart to the brain through the carotid artery is not. The result is an agonizing death.
And the stress of the restraint, the frustration, the anxiety, the rage, the fear of predation or capture while held by the snare, friction, penetration, and self-inflicted skin injuries while struggling against or fighting the tether pain, thirst, hunger, and exposure when we restrain for long periods of time, pain. You get the point. It's
You get the point.
inhuman.
It's inhumane, it's inhuman. You're
Yeah, to
absolutely
subject
right.
an animal to torture. I mean,
Yeah,
Put
no
your-
matter what the species is.
yeah,
They're
put
all
yourself as a
sentient creatures.
human in that situation.
Oh, please,
Yeah.
no trapper would. No
I
trapper
don't
would.
want to imagine.
No. And for those that can stomach this, we have footage of a female badger who was almost cut in two by a snare, but was still alive when found by a doctor. You can go to the website and see pictures, but a free-running snare was set near a badger entrance at Hood Green, Barnsley in South Yorkshire. It caught this female badger and cut her abdomen open, killing her. The cub was also found dead. The free-running snare that trapped and killed her is also shown. We'll have that website up. But it's out of sight, out of mind.
Exactly.
But if people saw this and the pain that inflicts, the cruelty, you couldn't possibly condone it. Finally, when the doctor touched the badger, its heart fell out, still beating before it died. And this is the reality of snares.
The current Vermont law provides that a person shall not take an animal by snaring, nor shall he possess a snare with intent to use the same. This bill proposes to gut this provision entirely.
Again, it's House Bill 589, and from what we know now, Representative David Dean from Westminster is the only sponsor of this bill. That in itself speaks volumes.
Absolutely. How long have the use of snares been illegal?
Well, the provision prohibiting the use of snares was added in 1961. There's a thought from local Vermonters that it was in the 1920s, but we can point to 1961.
And I understand that there's a strong effort to introduce this bill that the sponsor has brought in a biologist from out of state.
Yeah, and I wonder how much that cost.
Yeah.
Do taxpayers pay for it, or is it the Fish and Wildlife? But it shows you what lanes they'll go to. It's pretty telling if they can't find people within our own state to represent our laws. And having advocated for many animal welfare bills, I'm aware if something stands out in its own merit, there are several legislators that'll sign on. Obviously, this bill is not one of them.
In addition, this bill proposes to repeal the regular deer season statute. And I'll read that to you. It currently provides for the 16 consecutive calendar days commencing 12 days prior to Thanksgiving Day, a person may take by lawful means one wild deer as prescribed by the Vermont Fish and Wildlife regulations. And instead of this, leave it to the Fish and Wildlife Board rules.
Yeah, similarly, this bill removes important procedural requirements with respect to the hunting and migrating of birds by authorizing the Fish and Wildlife Board to establish by procedure the annual harvest numbers for migrating birds without following the procedures for rulemaking, the Administration Procedural Act, whose purpose is
Agencies maximize the involvement of the public in the development of rules.
in other words, the public's cut out.
Right, exactly.
So animals only belong to the Fish and Wildlife.
Exactly. The agency inclusion of public participation in the rulemaking process should be consistent. The General Assembly should articulate as clearly as possible the intent of any legislation which delegates rulemaking authority. And when an agency adopts policy or procedures, it should not do so to supplant or avoid the adoption of rules.
It's pretty scary.
It is very scary.
So this piece of legislation needs more attention than we can give it in a half hour. We'd like to continue this discussion and we'll be following this bill, but we'd also like everybody to know that you have a responsibility and you have a voice in making any legislation happen or not happen. Please call your representative, call your senators, and if you need help finding who they are, you can call us directly at 802-672-5302 or toll free. You can call the Vermont Sergeant at Arms at the State House and they will deliver a message to your senators and your representatives. And you want to say very clearly, vote no for House Bill 589 and send that message to Representative David Dean.
Remember that you have the voice to make things happen.
And it's everybody's responsibility. Thanks for watching For the Animals, and please join us again next week.
Does that look like a male or?
Yeah, I think it is.
It's lovely. What size trap's that? That's the 1 3/4 again, is it? What's that? Yep.
Oh yeah, yeah, they're pretty.
Got a bit more to do.
Nothing's gonna hurt, bud.
Oh. Bigger than he looks. You're supposed to go unconscious when I hit you. Alright, you're gonna have to come back.
the tail, isn't there? Is that? Yeah. So how do you tell when it's dead? Is it? Can you tell by the eye?
At dusk, there came a turning. There was a moment when all was known. You could feel